My brother forced me out of the house so he could turn my room into a gaming space. Now, years later, after learning that I bought my own home, my parents are demanding that I hand it over to him. When I was younger, I lived with my mom, stepdad, and younger half-brother. My brother was always their favorite because my mom disliked being reminded of my father, whom she cheated on. For reasons I never understood, she blamed me for it. I was often ignored and left out. For years, I tried to tolerate it, but things became unbearable when I was about 14. My brother was spoiled and always got what he wanted. He was obsessed with video games and started complaining that the house didn't have enough space for him to have his own gaming room, something he'd seen elsewhere and now wanted. My parents began hinting that I should leave so my brother could take my room. At first, I thought they were joking, since they often told me to leave and called me useless. But soon I realized they were serious. They began pressuring me, saying I was practically an adult and it was time to move out. I told them I was too young to work, had nowhere to go, and wasn't anywhere near adulthood. But eventually, they decided it was time for me to leave. One day, I came home from school to find all my belongings thrown on the sidewalk. It was devastating. I moved from shelter to shelter until someone changed my life. A police officer who lived near one of the shelters. Over time, we got to know each other. A few months later, she took me in and eventually adopted me. Without her, I don't know how I would have managed to rebuild my life. Years passed, and I worked hard to move on. I studied, saved, and built my own business, eventually buying my own home. I couldn't have done it without my adoptive mother, who funded my education and helped me launch my business. When things improved, I also bought her a house so she could finally stop renting. But when my biological family discovered that I had bought a home for myself and for my adoptive mother, everything resurfaced. Apparently, the man who sold me the house was a family acquaintance, and the news spread quickly. It began with a message from my stepfather, dry and direct, as if he'd never thrown me out. "We heard about your new house. It's about time you did something for the family that raised you." Family that raised me? The same family that kicked me out at 14 so my brother could have a gaming space? The same family that never comforted me or made sure I ate when I went to bed crying? The same family that left me on the street without caring if I survived? The next day, my mother called me. The last time I had heard her voice was when she yelled at me to get off the sidewalk because I was ruining the look of the house. I answered, curious to see how far they would go. She didn't ask how I was, if I was happy or even healthy. She went straight to her demand. "Your brother is getting married and needs a place to start his life. You don't need 2 houses." I felt such deep anger that my hands shook. I took a deep breath and answered calmly, "You want me to give up the house I fought years to earn for someone who's never fought for anything just because he's getting married?" She replied without hesitation, "He's your brother. Family helps family." Family helps family? I slept on park benches, hungry and scared. Where were they when I needed shoes for school? Where were they when I was beaten at a shelter and hospitalized with no visitors? I hung up. I thought I'd have peace, but I underestimated how far they'd go. Days later, I started receiving messages from unknown numbers. "You'll regret turning your back on your family. You have a blood debt to us." My adoptive mother even received an anonymous message accusing her of interfering in a family that wasn't hers. That crossed the line for me. I went to the police to file a report. I had contacts now. I had proof. I wasn't the helpless boy they once threw out. What broke me was hearing from an old schoolmate, now my parents' neighbor, that my mother was spreading lies. She told people that the house I bought came from an inheritance from my father, the same man she cheated on and despised, and that I'd renounced my blood for money. That was it. I decided to confront them, not just for me, but for the 14-year-old me who cried while hugging clothes thrown onto the sidewalk, while his brother got a new console with the money meant for my school uniform. The next morning, I drove to the neighborhood where I grew up. I wasn't nostalgic. I wanted them to see what they'd lost. I parked my new car outside the old house, now even more run down than before. I rang the bell firmly. The woman who raised me is living happily in the house I gave her. You just gave birth to me, and maybe even that wasn't by choice. For the first time, she was speechless, and in that silence, I said goodbye, not with tears, but with relief. I left that day feeling lighter. I knew it wouldn't be the end, but I had finally stood my ground. I should have known they wouldn't stop. People like that don't accept no. Less than a week later, my phone rang again. It was a social worker. At first, I thought it was about my business, but the call shocked me. Sir, we received an anonymous report claiming the woman who lives with you, your adoptive mother, is being abused, prevented from leaving, and financially exploited. My blood ran cold. Not because it was true, it wasn't, but because I knew exactly who had done it. I can guarantee that's false, I said, holding back my anger. My mother is free, independent, and her money is her own. But you're welcome to come and speak to her. 2 days later, a social worker and an elder care representative arrived. They questioned us, inspected everything, and when my mother realized what was happening, tears of indignation filled her eyes. "They're trying to destroy you again, my son," she said, hugging me. "But you're not alone anymore. They won't succeed." After the visit, I requested an official report confirming the complaint was unfounded. But I wasn't stopping there. I called my lawyer. This time, I was serious about a lawsuit. Enough veiled threats. They had crossed a line that should never be crossed. Meanwhile, rumors spread online. My parents claimed I had manipulated my adoptive mother, that she'd taken me in for her own interests, and that I used her money to buy houses and show off, as if I hadn't spent years selling candy on street corners, working as a waiter, pulling all-nighters to study. And their next move would be even dirtier than before. It all began with a court summons, a lawsuit filed against me. The accusation? Improper appropriation of family inheritance. Yes, you heard correctly. My biological parents claimed that the house I purchased with my own work, in my name, fully paid and registered, had been bought using money they said came from an inheritance from my biological father. The same father who passed away without leaving even a watch behind. The man my mother openly despised and betrayed. Yet suddenly, they insisted I had taken what supposedly belonged to the family clan, as if I had ever truly been part of such a clan. To strengthen their claim, they attached edited conversations, cropped messages, and even brought in a witness, our talkative neighbor. He testified that he had once heard my adoptive mother say the house was gifted by a relative. I laughed at the absurdity. It was almost comical, but my lawyer did not laugh. He explained that while the lawsuit lacked legal grounds, it could still cause serious harm, blocking my financial transactions, damaging my reputation, scaring clients, and creating unnecessary obstacles. It was clear they weren't seeking justice. They wanted revenge. That's when I realized this wasn't about property. It was personal. They couldn't stand to see me succeed. They couldn't accept that despite everything they had done to erase me, I had built a life for myself. The child they cast out had grown into someone strong enough to tell his story. I refused to retreat. I began preparing. I collected receipts, contracts, construction photos, and bank transfers. I asked my adoptive mother to write a statement. Through tears, she described everything, from finding me at the shelter to signing my adoption papers, to nights spent at hospitals when I battled panic attacks from rejection. As we built our legal defense, something unexpected happened. I received a long message from my brother's fiancée. She said she was reconsidering the marriage. She admitted she had believed the family's lies because, as she put it, who would invent something so terrible about their own child? But after reading leaked screenshots and articles, she began piecing things together. She confessed my brother was aggressive, controlling, prone to angry outbursts, and in the weeks leading up to the wedding, he had become almost unrecognizable. Then came her admission. If not for your story, I might be about to make the biggest mistake of my life. I replied with respect, wishing her strength and making it clear I bore no grudge. She wasn't at fault. The blame rested on those who thought they could manipulate everything without consequences. And at that moment, I understood something powerful. True revenge wasn't about destroying anyone. It was about living so fully and freely that their bitterness became meaningless. But the fight wasn't over. They still had one last card to play, and it would be the dirtiest yet. The hearing was approaching. My lawyer was confident. We had irrefutable documents, testimony, and even an audit ordered by the judge. Everything pointed toward exposing them. Then, the night before the hearing, disaster struck. My adoptive mother was hit by a car in a deliberate hit and run, right outside her home in broad daylight. The driver, a known acquaintance of my biological family, he claimed she suddenly stepped in front of the car, but witnesses said otherwise. They testified he saw her, accelerated, and only braked after hitting her. Thankfully, she survived, though with a broken leg and deep psychological wounds. Through tears, she told me it was her fault, that they were punishing her because they could no longer hurt me directly. Watching her in that hospital bed, this woman who had saved me from abandonment, I swore the cycle would end here. The next day, I walked into the courtroom, calm on the outside, but burning inside. My parents and brother were dressed formally, acting like victims of an ungrateful son. But their performance would not work this time. My lawyer presented receipts, bank reports, testimonies. The judge listened closely, her expression shifting as evidence piled up. Then it was my turn. I spoke for half an hour, recounting everything, from childhood neglect to sleeping on sidewalks to shelters to the woman they were now trying to destroy. By the time I finished, the room was silent. My parents were pale. My brother stared at the ground. Then the judge spoke words I'll never forget. This court does not exist to validate emotional blackmail, nor to reward parents who abandon their children. Case dismissed. And given the evidence, I recommend an investigation into false accusations, perjury, and attempted fraud. I had won, but more importantly, they had lost. Lost their control, their false narrative, their respectability, if they ever had any. I went further. I filed for moral damages, demanded protection for my adoptive mother, sued the driver, and froze my brother's assets, which he had been hiding under his fiancée's company. She had called off the wedding by then, after discovering his illegal gambling schemes. That night, when I returned home, my adoptive mother greeted me with a tired but genuine smile. She hugged me and whispered, "Now you're free, my son." For the first time, I believed it. But something still lingered. The wound wasn't fully healed. Legal justice was done, yet I wanted them to truly hear me, to face me. So I arranged a meeting, not to reconcile, but to close the chapter on my terms. I sent a message to the family group, the same one they had expelled me from years earlier. "You have 15 minutes of my time tomorrow at noon. If you want to hear what you've always avoided, show up." The next day, I set up 2 chairs and a recorder in the event hall of my adoptive mother's house, the house I proudly bought for her. Surprisingly, they came. My mother, my stepfather, my brother, now without his fiancée, his money, and on the verge of eviction. They sat down, pretending to be victims. I pressed record. "This conversation is for me," I said. "Not for court, not for the public, but to remind myself of who I was, who you tried to erase, and who I became despite you." When my mother tried to interrupt, saying everyone makes mistakes, I stopped her. "Mistakes? Forgetting a birthday is a mistake. What you did was abandonment. You left a child on the streets to satisfy the whims of another." My stepfather muttered that I was ungrateful, but I reminded him of my nights on cold floors, my years in shelters, while they spoiled a son who grew into a man trying to extort the only person who built something alone. For once, my brother stayed silent. The lies shielding him had crumbled. "I don't hate you," I continued. "Hate would mean you still matter to me. You don't. What I feel is gratitude for forcing me out, because without that, I wouldn't have found my real mother. I wouldn't have found my strength, and I wouldn't know that family isn't blood. Family is the one who lifts you when the world turns its back." I stopped the recorder, stood up, and left. They had no response. Months later, I heard my biological mother applied for social assistance. The damages lawsuit continued. Their lives fell apart, but I took no joy in it. What I felt was peace, because I knew who I was, what I had built, and that my story was one of victory, not revenge. Today, I give lectures on resilience and overcoming hardship. My company thrives. My adoptive mother, my true mother, lives with me, healthy and surrounded by friends who treat her as the queen she is. And each time I see my reflection, I no longer see a victim, but someone who walked through fire and returned, not with ashes, but with bridges strong enough for others to cross.